Hey, my name is Vaibhav Sharma, and you're listening to Just Baate.
I'm a fool for your love.
Hey guys, welcome back to Just Baate. My name is Aswin. Like always, I have Praatibh alongside with me. Praatibh and I don't really have a lot in common, but the one thing we do have in common today is that both of us are sick. I mean, we have done this before. I think the episode with Yogita ma'am, the psychologist. So go check that out if you haven't. But yes, Praatibh and I are sick. Praatibh, before I introduce the guest, you have a lot of passions. You have a lot of things that you hold on to. I mean, you of course have a lot of people around you too, but you do have a lot of passions. The question to you is, how do you prioritize it? Do you prioritize those passions in terms of how much money they bring to you, or in terms of how much happiness they bring to you?
I'd say it's a bit of a trade-off. Obviously, things that do make me happy are awesome to do, but at the same time, I need to also look out for my financial part of things. And I mean, you can never have enough money, and I'm particularly inclined to money. So I would say sometimes I do prioritize sort of things that get me money, but at the same time, they bring me joy as well. And other times, maybe it also depends on other factors. Like if I want to play cricket, I do need more people with me to play cricket.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
That's that.
I mean, to be fair, bringing more money itself can be a passion, so even that can bring you happiness. So yeah, why not? But yes, talking about the guest and introducing him, he does have a lot of passion. He plays the trumpet. He's played for When Chai Met Toast. He's played for Canada India Youth Orchestra. He's a motorsport lover. He's a beautiful writer. I've also seen his art stuff, and he says he's not a good painter, but I think otherwise, because he's beautiful. But he's here today to talk about his entrepreneurial skills, the word I practiced for so long. But yes, he's here for that. Vaibhav Sharma, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks so much. It's great to be on here.
It's great to have you. Now, before we jump on and talk about your entrepreneurial skills, that word. But before we talk about that, we have an icebreaker for you. So I know a story about how you played a musical piece on the trumpet, which no one else could, and you made Swami Narayan, who's your mentor.
Narayan Swami.
Narayan Swami. Sorry, I'm so... Oh, yeah. Damn it. But Narayan Swami,
no
your mentor tear up and you made the whole crowd emotional. Do you remember how you felt when you got off stage? And what you thought and what you felt back then?
Yes, I mean, it's definitely euphoric, because, in fact, just earlier today I was talking about it with my mom, funnily enough. It was a moment of calm because everybody was just quiet and just reveling in the emotion of the moment itself. So that was something special. I would say definitely, I would probably rank it up in the top 3, biggest achievements of mine as far as music is concerned. Yeah, I mean, if you move people with the things that you do, then that's all that counts.
Oh yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
So now I think we'll get straight into it. I want to know a little bit about your entrepreneurial side of things. So it says you're an undergraduate in computer science. You've also done integration engineering and software engineering where you've worked. Having all this engineering background, was there a screw that made you move into business, or was business or something around money something you always wanted to get into from the start? Or was it something around, say, a curiosity to build and create stuff?
Awesome. So I think, while dialing it back even further than that, I would say the initial passion was always to join the Air Force as a pilot. And then I never got into the NDA. I tried my hand at the AFCAT, got up to the last day, where we had the board meeting, so to speak. I'm forgetting the exact term for it, but we had that. And then out of 147 people, they only picked one person. And then when I came out of, that entire week's worth of, boot camp and living a different lifestyle that I'm typically used to, I was just like, this is probably not something I'm cut out for. And by this time, I was already 4 years down with engineering, and my eyes had been open to, opportunities that could arise by leveraging your skill sets and technology to build things. Right. So I would say that started back in college itself, where I always wanted to. When I say always, I mean say since second year of college, wanted to start something of my own. something specific. It started off with an idea, and but I never really had the skill set to the guidance, to
right.
get around going about it. So I was just like, you know what, I'm okay with taking like a couple of years to just immerse myself in the ecosystem of business in itself by being one among the contributors as far as being a developer and so on. Just seeing how companies are ranging from product to service companies, from startups to established unicorns to like up and coming companies and so on. Just got my hands dirty in terms of actually developing and building myself as an individual through these, and then picking up bits and pieces here and there from the business teams within these larger organizations in terms of how they go about running these businesses. So and again, while working here, you obviously network with people across
Right.
different walks of life, and one thing leads to another, and you end up realizing, hey, I specifically ended up taking a pause and saying, hey, okay, I think I've had my fair share of working as an employee. Now I want to start something of my own, because it's no better time than now, right? So I was like, what do I have at my disposal? That's quote unquote my unfair advantage.
Right.
So took stock of that and then sort of just dove into it, and I would say that's what kicked it off.
But was it an inclination, so then you could have, because you always wanted to start a business eventually, you could have also done an undergrad in business, right? So, or was it that you wanted to do something related to computers or technology? Was it because of that? Is that why you did engineering? Or because you had to do engineering?
No, neither, right?
Oh.
It's just it's truly, to be honest, I was never academically inclined. I was always one of those kids who was more into extracurricular activities. I've played probably every sport there is except for hockey, at some decent level. Done martial arts, and basically my folks pushed me into everything possible so that I can get that those different kinds of exposure, because that's how they were also raised, by just being kids that had fun. So I was never deprived of those opportunities, and that's sort of, I would say, I was never really, like I said, academically inclined. And then when I came to 12th grade, I had really fudged up my grades, and I was just like, okay, what again, like at that point I took stock in terms of what am I good at. Then I looked at my grades, and I was like, computer science is something that's always been my saving grace, because that's something that just came to me. Even though my teacher back in school never really liked me because I was always a notorious kid in her class, according to her. So, but having said that, I ended up scoring well enough, so she always had this like love-hate relationship.
Right.
So I was like, okay, cool. Let me dive into computer science engineering, and how do I go about that? Then just dove into it.
Whoa, that's such a beautiful story. Now, I've come into your room. I've one of the fortunate ones who's walked into the room, of course. But you have a whole wall filled with whiteboard and filled with things written on it, and it almost felt like I was watching a movie, because every tech movie, like, I mean, at least they show that's all people do. But it felt like that, and we have also had a conversation about this and how you locked yourself in the room before you started your company because you wanted to write things down and make sure everything was okay. But what was one unexpected obstacle that you faced while starting the company itself?
That's a good question. I would, as far as building businesses go, I sort of had the easy way, because I had a couple of mentors who were veterans themselves in the space to help me get off the ground. But I would say probably on the personal front, there were a few adversities that I had to dive through over the course of building the company itself. That's probably something unexpected that didn't really pose too much of an obstacle or a threat, because I kept building regardless. But it definitely did come in the way. It was a patch of mud on the road.
I mean, I feel like the idea of being a born leader is very overrated. I don't think anyone can be a born leader. But do you think the experience that you have had even in school, you were house captain, vice captain, you took responsibilities in a lot of different positions. Do you think that helped you in one way or the other? Because being a founder and starting a business is also manhandling. Like you have people under you, you have a whole team. So do you feel like that came naturally to you, or was there a lot of pressure?
That was a funny, crude way of putting it, but so there, I would say the only thing that comes decently enough to me is what my parents like to call the gift of the gab, where I can talk. I'm capable of clear communication, and that's sort of helped me in my path. So just my folks always want me to say get into say doing an MBA post my work experience. Why don't you go? Why don't you go? But I was like, hey, I want to start a business. That's not something that I want to necessarily dive into. And I was literally at a point where there was a fork in the road. I was like, okay, which way do I go? So yeah, I never really was necessarily good at it because I didn't have past experience of managing teams at large. But I would say over the course of working as a software dev and stuff, there were instances where, you know, in the work setting, I led a few people, got objectives done, stood up to, I would say, took it upon myself to rise up to the occasion of, say when somebody had to demo something to a Fortune 50 company and their internet died out because everybody's remote working thanks to COVID. I had internet functional, and even though I didn't develop any of what they were going to demonstrate, I managed to just sort of run through it and also breeze past the obvious bugs that were present and managed to convince the guys that we're on track and doing well. So, like, I think it's just about weaving a story, the capability to put yourself in different people's shoes, or basically find fresher perspectives that are not intrinsically your own. That's something that helps along the process for sure.
Yeah. So along those lines itself, so the initial question I was going to ask was, how was your first day in corporate, and how was your first time leading a team? How did that make you feel? But now, because you've already spoken a bit about leadership, are you one of those people who sort of get a kick, I guess, from leading teams? And I mean, do you feel that somewhere is something that comes to you more naturally than maybe working under someone? Because or if you want to phrase it in a way such that you work better individually as compared to in a team?
No, so it's not like I have an aversion to work as part of bigger teams that I don't necessarily run point on. I mean, I've been there, I've done that, and I think it's just about whether you look at it from looking at upwards to a boss or looking at downwards to subordinates. It's just about how do you share an equation with another human being that makes sense. So at the end of the day, that's literally what defines any working equation. So I don't even look at it as I literally don't look at it as leading a team, right? Like I just look at it as that being being one among a team that's collectively working towards good goals or good objectives, and they're trying to make a difference in the way that we're working. So that's essentially the core focus, which is why, for me, if I were to say hire somebody, their skill set does matter but to a very minor degree, because skills are acquirable, but personality, characteristic traits of a person, those are all, I would say, indispensable, right? And you need somebody who you can synergize with, who can synergize with everyone around you, who can add value by just being themselves. And then when you get them onto the team, you give them the freedom to fail and you give them the freedom to be themselves, and you become a team. So it's not something that you necessarily find a kick out of in terms of saying, hey, I'll lead a few people and build a company. It's just about, hey, I want to build a product. I focus on the product building. Does this idea sound good to you? Do you want to add your value and skill set to building this product with me? Let's go. That's it.
Yeah, that's a very constructive way of looking at things. And I mean, that's a great point that you made about probably synergizing with your teammate, colleague. In situations where maybe you're not synergizing well, and because I think personally for me also, I'm just getting into the corporate world. So there are times when I don't sort of probably gel well with someone. In these situations, what is something that you can do to maybe better that relationship and get work done?
See, that's something that's not an objective answer. It's a very subjective thing, right? So to try and abstract it as best possible and look at it from top-down view, I'd probably say just one, take stock of what the equation is at. Have a bias and try your best to have an unbiased. opinion of what the situation is. Is it a you problem, or is it the problem of the person who you can't synergize with? Right? Like I always look inward first, like inward first, and then like say, okay, cool. Is there something that I can do to actively fix it without necessarily straining an equation? So yeah, just deal, like I would say, taking accountability for what part you have to play in an equation with the person, and just being honest with yourself, and having the empathy to fix it if it's your fault. And the empathy to do that, and the ownership and the accountability to do so, because it does take that.
I think a lot of people forget to look at themselves first, because
that's the most important thing, right?
But it's also very easy to blame it on the other person, because if you have to think about yourself, then
in the heat of the moment, it's always so that's something that I've like sort of like been doing most of my life, which is, if ever there comes a time where there's the moment the situation gets a little heated, I just go mute. I just take a pause, because I know I'm not going to answer intelligently. I know I'm not going to contribute valuably to the situation to make it better. So just take a few steps back, say, hey, let's take some time to think, cool off, and then approach this together.
You have been through a lot more than anyone. I mean, a lot more than I know. And so the question is, how do you go through that personally, and then come up to the company, come up in front of your team, and have the day go forward? How do you show up? What do you do? How do you personally deal with it? Then the next day go up and go in front of your team and make sure that the company is running.
That's a definitely a tough one to see. Sometimes you just have to swallow the bitter pill sometimes, right? And just like, your day can be going shitty, but if you're contributing that or propagating that crappy feeling that you have onto your team, you're just not adding value, and you're being a poor team player, right? So that's something that I would say it's definitely a two-way street in terms of my team making it a safe space for me as well. So that goes back into getting people on board who are just good human beings fundamentally, and like that's the most important thing. When you have like a safe space to work, you are in a comfort zone, because then it doesn't feel like you're going to work. You're just going to another place where you have like a bunch of friends with you who are working with you. So then you can just be yourself, and like if you obviously need your space, you get your space. Like people don't necessarily interrupt, and if you're obviously going through you're having a moment in a day, you'll have people who approach you and are there for you and look out for you. And this in fact has even extended to people outside my team. I've worked with people like the product folks like Suhas and Adi, who run the product folks. They're a huge community that they run a huge community rather, over like 100,000 people and so on. These guys we've worked with them, we collaborated with them on projects and stuff, and they are very good friends, and they've known whenever I've had a downtime and stuff, and it's a personal touch that just matters. So like one day, for example, like I'll never forget, like they just, on two separate occasions, one day they just sent me like ice cream, and one day they sent me like junk food, just to they knew I was working into the wee hours of the night, and they just shipped it home, and that just made all the difference to me. And like it was just like that one act of kindness that just made the day worth it. So it's just about finding the right people and qualities within people to work with, and the only way you can do that is if you are making an active effort yourself to be that person to other people.
Now, taking a step back, we have a question about how your parents influenced you, because you spoke about how your folks at home influenced you to get into a lot of things, but we asked your mom about how she found out about your company. So I mean, we have a voice recording, so I'll play that for you.
Oh, wow. Are you serious? Okay.
Yeah.
When he floated the company in May in 21, and this was an accomplishment actually for us, because we had no clue about it, and he was working day and night on it. And then when the company was launched, and that was a major accomplishment for him. Uh, for him to do it, like, worked very hard for it, and his dream is to become a billionaire, a multi-billionaire, and he is working towards it, and I'm really proud of him about that, and I hope, and I'm sure he will make it. uh,
Yes.
She asked me, she's like, "Oh, it's been playing on my mind for some time now." I'm like, "I'm sure it hasn't." That seems fishy.
Yeah, so even the
But
icebreaker
well done.
was her information, her telling me what happened, and
Yeah.
I needed to find few stories about you. So yes, I did that. But yeah, I can't believe they didn't know about you starting a company this way, by the way. Why didn't you tell anyone about
So
it? Did you
yeah,
tell anyone about it?
yeah, no. So they were in the loop, but they didn't know to what degree. Because initially it started off as just me working with a few people and product managing a few projects that are running.
Right.
Um, that was the only inkling that I would give out to them, because uh, one, I guess, probably for personal, superstitious reasons, even though I'm
Yeah.
not really superstitious
Fair,
person.
fair.
But I'm just like, I don't want it to be a disappointment if it doesn't pan out. One, and two, I just want to. I had rather spend my energies focusing on building the company, and then tell them, hey, it's like, this is what I'm doing, and show them proof of the work, right? Like, just, I'd say, that ties down to, uh, the way the ecosystem that I'm working in. So proof of work is a
Right.
consensus
Blockchain.
mechanism. But
Yes.
basically, sorry, it's just a poor segue into a conversation. But yeah, winding back, I think I just wanted to show them, like, the work, saying, hey, look, this is what I'm working on. This is what it's tangibly panning out to. This is what we're working towards, and what my life is going to look like for the next few years. So yeah, I think they needed that confidence. Until then, I was moonlighting for like the first month, first, I would say, 3 months, 3 months building the company. And then when I had to take the leap of faith in terms of going full time, I took it with their, not necessarily the consent, even though I always had their consent, but just, again, like, I think is just for my own peace of mind, I had to ask them, saying, hey, are you guys okay with me, going full time? And then both of them were like, saying, you got to follow your dreams. If not now, then when? So just like, go for it. So they've been unendingly supportive every step of the way. Yeah.
How have your parents influenced you while growing up? And I don't know if I can ask you this, or if this is appropriate, but how has
No, for sure.
the last few years made you feel or think about them, or has anything changed? And I'm not going to talk about what happened, because it's not my
100%.
place, but yes, just that. Yeah.
No, for sure. Like, no, definitely. So my parents have always been like hard workers. They have been through so many rather trials and tribulations over the course of the years, bringing me up and stuff. And they were relentless in their pursuit to just, get to better pastures in life. And I think they did it. Like, mom and dad have always just been super hard workers, and they've been multiple, I would say 2 or 3 instances where both of them have gone a year at the same time without a job and stuff, and they still managed to, like, make sure my education, my extracurricular activities, nothing was ever hampered. And and imagine, like, even after having done all of that, dad always used to quote this one moment back when I was, like, I think around 6 or 7, where there was a street vendor who was selling like these plastic toys for like 10 rupees and this car and stuff. And I asked for a plastic toy, but then back then we literally didn't have the money to afford it at that point in time. And that's something that always broke his heart. And like, he immediately, when he could afford it, he went and got me some. So I was just like, the heart that always stuck through. And like, these, they've also tried their hand at, their own levels of entrepreneurship. They tried starting a couple of companies over the years, some before I was born, some just as I was born, but I was too young to, understand what's going on. And as recently as, say, 2009 was when, like, dad tried to start his last consulting venture and so on. So in fact, that landed him his like last role before he retired. So yeah, I mean, these guys have just been such hard workers, and it makes me, like, being where I am right now, you definitely do have like a reality check in terms of the hardships that your parents go through for you, just to not only put food on the table, but make it like a good, well spread meal, and to make you get whatever it is that you want without ever having to say no to you. Like, and in the process, they do so many other things, like even run a household. And like to this day, I cannot for the life of me wake up early with an alarm, because like when I sleep, it's like death with benefits. And then here my mom is waking up at 5 a.m. making sure, like,
that's also
before
because
I wake up
you
at
sleep
like
around 5-6 o'clock. I mean, the light in your
see,
room is
like,
always on.
Let's not dive into the sleep issues. No, but like, jokes apart, like, yeah, even when I do sleep fairly on time, it's tough for me to wake up and like, get things moving. Like my dad always used to have issues with me in terms of, you don't contribute to things in the house, you don't clean, you don't do this, you don't do that, everything's handed to you. And there's always a sense of like, there's always an undertone of saying you don't need to do it, but like you realize the values that you need to inculcate as a human being and so on. Right. So like that's something that they've made sure I don't even know how two people can just do so well as parents and like a family, in terms of bringing themselves up, bringing all of us up collectively as a family, doing well for yourself and your careers, setting your kid up, with all the ammunition he needs to face the world, whether it's academically, whether it's extracurricular wise, making sure I always had whatever it is that I've asked for without having to say no, and raising me without ever having raised a hand on me, like not once, right? Like they've just been methodical with the way they've gone about it. So yeah, like there's a deep rooted sense of gratitude, appreciation, and like just love, I would say, for them that I have after having just doing something as minuscule as trying to start a company. So yeah, I'm just like, yeah, I have long ways to go before I can clean the house and stuff. But those are learning curves I look forward to for sure.
However, taking a step back, you spoke a lot about sort of product and the stuff you've done with the product folks and everything. So could you tell us a little bit more about product itself? What all does it encompass? What do you guys do at Cope as well?
Okay, cool. So I think it's just to probably add to your question, I think you're asking about product building, like how do we go about building products? Building,
yeah.
So in a nutshell, Cope is a startup that builds other startups, right? We started off as what the world calls a Web 2 product studio. And I won't dive into the nuances of Web 1, 2, and 3. But
Praatibh loves that, by the way. Oh my God, I can't stop listening to it. But yes.
Oh, and we also have an episode on it. So
for sure. So we started off as a Web 2 product studio, and then pivoted to being a Web 3 product studio. Sorry.
Right.
So like product building probably has 4 main pillars to it, which you have design, engineering, growth, and product itself. When I say product, I mean management. Right? So the management is responsible for making sure things are well orchestrated, reach the end goal on time, if not ahead of time, if not on time. And being cognizant of timelines and I would say the quality of product that you put out. And also, chiming in, having everyone chime in rather on how the product vision takes shape. So it's a little broad scoped as a question in terms of how do you go about product development, but to sort of keep it as brief as possible, I'd say, it ties back to our the framework that we had set at Cope itself, which is as 0 to 1. So basically we help startups get from 0 to 1. Now you can be an already existing company that's trying to do a sub feature or a product, then you need hands on deck, or you're a new startup that has a great vision but not necessarily the manpower or the skill set in an area, but needs that that hands-on experience. So we functioned like we still do function like the extended founding team for these ideas. So we got our hands dirty with not only thinking about what the product is going to be, the go-to-market strategy, the product vision in itself, how is it going to scale over the short, mid, and long term, which is 1, 3, and 5 years. How do you go about fundraising? Who to put you in touch with, and how do you sort of have like your collaterals ready, your website and your product ready. We get our hands dirty with design and engineering that way as well. So sort of encompassing everything around the product building, the product being built rather, which is why we say with the extended founding team. So that's typically how we do it at Cope.
And I mean, because Web3, okay, now it's been around for quite some time, but still it's relatively new as a concept to a lot of people. So how do you go about explaining this to someone who's probably not a part of the ecosystem already? And has that posed difficulty in probably raising rounds of funding and that kind of stuff?
Right. So that's a multi-pronged question there. So just taking what Web3 is in itself, today there's the adoption rates are very low, right? Like the fundamental target of most Web3 companies or blockchains in itself are to bring people onto the Web3 ecosystem. So that's still a work in progress. Educating people is still something that hasn't been fully cracked yet. There's no resounding name for saying, hey, here's where you go to learn about Web3, right? Like that's probably one of the biggest races or other that can take shape if it's not already. So helping people understand does get a little tricky. Just about tearing it down into as simple terminologies as possible without diving too much into the jargon. And so Web 1.0 was like, military based, started by the Army, US Army and all of that. And, it was information that you could only read. Web 2 is what you know it as today, where you contribute to it, but you don't own any of the information. Like YouTube owns your videos, Instagram owns your images. They can just shut down the application anytime and then you just lose access. So things like that. But then Web 3 is where not only do you contribute, but you actually own your own content, your identity, and so on. And it's decentralization, scalability, and security. And that's a trilemma of a blockchain. And I think it just sort of ties back into what the ecosystem is in itself.
Last couple of questions before we end this, but I'm going to stick with mental health because that's something I'm comfortable with. But I mean, you talk about how, we've had a conversation off camera back home and everything about how you find time to do things you love. So motorsport, riding the bike around, traveling and meeting your friends. But how important is it for you to have your employees do that too? Like have your employees make sure they are doing mentally well? How important, not employers, but teammates but employees. They are your employees. So how important is it?
I think it's probably one of the most important things for me, like me personally, right? Like, it's deeply humbling to have a team on board that believes in the vision to the point where they're burning the midnight oil. If you ask me, as a startup, as any company for that matter, if you look at even like a KPMG at its scale and its long-term existence, they still grill employees to the point where they're working 18-hour days and so on.
Whoa.
Now, for sure. But even in here building Cope and stuff, like I've lost track of the number of days I've spent at the office, like stayed over and stuff. Now that's me right now, but about my teammates, we typically see it's important to be cognizant of the fact that if you're trying to be a team that actually impacts change, you have to move quick and you have to do it with as limited number of resources as possible. That does end up you burning the midnight oil.
Right.
But I always make it a point to say, hey dude, stop working, go home and get some sleep. It's okay to pick this up tomorrow.
So you make the conscious effort of telling them and everything?
I do. I chase them out. I chase them home. I'm just dude, go home. Just go spend time with your family, go on a date, do something, go for a walk, eat junk food, go to the gym, live your life, because it's important to do that. It's very important because you will just end up burning out. I do not enforce people working the weekends at all. I'm just weekends are yours until and unless there's a project that we have a long-term sight of, we've known about it for a few weeks, months, and we say, hey, okay, we're cutting short on the deadline. We have to really pull a weekend thing for this. I don't really ask anyone to work the weekends at all. And even then, right, I think it's just if you are not there with them working, you are being a poor leader. right? And of course, that doesn't mean just go there and sit, right? It means you have to do something that contributes meaningfully to the problem. Like you contribute meaningfully to making life easier and trying to get it done so that they don't burn the midnight oil. So yeah, I think I've always made sure that I've showed up and just been there with them, and yeah, I now we in fact. It's a fun office space. We have Nerf guns in the office, so I end up shooting people and saying "Go
Oh,
home."
that's nice.
So
That
yeah,
is
so
perfect.
I was like, yeah, so just like have like a full-on Nerf war in the office and say "Go home." Why are you here? It's like 6 p.m. It's like 7 p.m. Like buzz off. So
But that's nice though. So that's a good environment to stay in. And if your boss is doing that, what better company to work at? Well, thank you so much for all of this time of yours. But this is how we end our podcasts. Are you a tea or a coffee person?
yes, coffee.
Or really, you didn't even give it a second thought? Or disappointing. I mean, good for you. Why not? Because
I mean, I'm good with tea also, but I'm just like I'll instantly choose coffee.
right. We have this leadership board where we count how many guests choose coffee, and I think
Tally our
except
guests.
apart from the two of us, and I think one more, everyone's chosen
One or two guests. Yeah,
coffee.
everyone's chosen coffee.
That's a disappointment. I think one of the reasons I hope you guys bump into him is because he'll take you to Shell, and that's when your eyes will open up, drinking the best hot chocolate in the world. Oh, that's just too bloody
Oh
good.
God.
I think that's a recommend. Like, you guys should go to the Shell petrol pump and have hot chocolate. Like, that's the best thing in the world.
Only those in Bangalore and around Koramangala.
Yeah, of course. Only those in Bangalore, yes. But Vaibhav, thank you so much for joining in. This has been a pleasure. Guys, thank you so much for watching and thank you so much for listening.
And thanks so much.
Yo, thanks for tuning into the latest episode of Just Baatein. We hope you enjoyed it and that it left you inspired. Thanks for all your support, and maybe you could support us just a little more by maybe going to our Instagram and Twitter and giving us a follow there. And also you can listen to us on all podcasting platforms, right from Spotify to Apple Podcasts to Google Podcasts. Cheers.